Hello, this is Aaron Wissner of Local Future. I'm here live with Ellen Jaffe Jones, direct from Sarasota, Florida. Ellen, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Nice to see you.
Today we're going to talk about your book, How to Eat Well on $4 a Day, more or less. That's the topic we're going to have. Ellen, how is it that you know how to eat well on $4 a day?
Well, we don't want to drive people too crazy looking for a book called Eat Well on $4 a Day, because that was the original title. I came up because we didn't want to use the V word, vegan. But my publisher, who was very forthcoming, it was 2011, the very year that vegan as a word started outperforming the word vegetarian on Google by a ratio of 6-1. So my publisher said, let's use the word vegan. And so we did. And so the book is Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, but you can totally eat well, whatever it is you're trying to deal with, boosting your immune system. All of that is just so enhanced by plants.
Awesome. So a lot of people right now, we are here in May of 2020. A lot of people are really tight on cash because things are just going tough right now. A lot of people are not at work right now. A lot of people were hoping to have some maybe funding from the government, but that didn't necessarily come through. And people are looking at, the next month or two, and they're wondering how to eat well on not a lot of money. So can you tell us, like, what sort of meals would be like things that you eat, cheap meals, cheap but healthy, eating well on $4 a day meals?
And keep in mind, I've been doing this for the better part of 40 years. Mom and both sisters had breast cancer. We were part of the BRCA1, BRCA2 genetic studies. I'm the only adult female in my family with that. And of course, now they're all deceased. So, I've been singing this song for a lot of years. And as I like to say, there's no money in broccoli. And when you understand that, then you have to be your own investigative reporter, like I was on television news for a lot of years, to figure this out. Most doctors don't go to nutrition classes in medical schools, so that's why this information has been challenging to get out there, although now it's much more in the mainstream, just because people like me are running around the country yelling all this and doing. By the way, I'm a nationally ranked sprinter. I won a gold medal at the National Senior Games, and they featured me as Athlete of the Month in April. So, this is getting so mainstream. So question is, what do you eat? It's real simple: beans and grains, beans and grains. If you buy the beans from scratch, in bulk, that's about a nickel an ounce, which is a dime a serving for 4 ounces of high quality plant-based protein. And people go, "Ooh, have I got to cook from scratch?" And I go, especially if they're moaning about how much time it takes. And I go, like, if you get cancer, diabetes, or heart disease, those are real time wasters. So picking a couple of times a week to maybe pressure cook your beans, because that'll cut the cooking time down by at least a half, and then some brown rice. You can do that really for the week. It'll stay in the fridge that long. Have some salsa on hand if you're in a hurry out the door. Mix the rice and the beans together with the salsa. And that's always what I will do, especially if I know I'm going to some place where it's not going to be a vegan friendly meal. So there's that. You can mix it up with the whole grains like quinoa. Millet is, they put that in bird seed. I'm not suggesting you go eat what they sell in stores for bird seed, but look at it.
Are quinoa and millet something a person can find in a regular grocery store, or is that like a specialty store?
No. We're talking, and the recipes that I developed in Eat Vegan on $4 a Day were developed when I was a single working mom, and all I wanted to do was prepare some healthy meals in a hurry for my 3 daughters at the end of a workday. So these are ingredients, and every single recipe in that cookbook has an estimated price based on ingredients you can find at Walmart or Costco, any big box store. And people go, "Ew, are you recommending Walmart?" And I'm going, "Ew, if you live for a family of 4 under the national poverty rate, which is $23,000 a year. If you do the math, that works out to $4 a day. And that's exactly why I chose that price. And, the price of beans and grains, especially brown rice, just hasn't gone up all that much over 30 years. I've actually had people stand up in my audiences and say those kinds of things. Even a monk at a monastery says, I cook for the monastery and we do it on $1 a day. And all we eat pretty much is beans and grains, and we have our own, victory garden garden out in the back kind of thing. And so, you know, to get the produce, and I have a section in the book, how to get organic produce, because people say, can you do organic on $4 a day? And there are ways you can do it. Here in Florida, before all the world shut down, we had CSAs, community supported agriculture farms, or co-ops, and they would be at farmers markets, or, you know, you could get a share of what they were doing on a weekly basis. It was maybe, you know, $10 to $15 for the week of all this organic produce. And if you go to volunteer at these places or do work shares, then it's really cool because you can often get the produce for free. So it's just, there are all different ways you can do it. And certainly lots of people now are looking at growing their own, and that definitely is an option depending where you live. You know, certainly here in Florida, we have no problem growing anything pretty much most times of the year. So, you know,
so what do you call your meals? Like, a lot of times people will have a certain number of meals that they cycle through during a week. Like they'll have taco night and pizza night and burger night and et cetera, et cetera. Can you maybe just list off, like, what are some of the meals that you might prepare for $4 a day?
Well, you kind of just did it. But a thing I like to do, because I do like to have my fresh produce, and I'm really into the dark green leafies just for boosting your immune system. You know, I'll do a smoothie with, you know, some almost rotting bananas and mangoes or something like that, that, you know, I can get locally because they grow locally. But, you know, that'll be maybe dessert, something like that. You know, you can freeze it if you want. But, you know, just some form of beans and grains. That's really the animal, non-animal meat of of whatever it is you're making, whether it's a burrito. You know, I'll keep some burritos on hand. You can keep those frozen if you don't want to just let them sit out for the week. I like sprouted corn tortillas that you can get at the different stores. Or just plain corn tortillas if, you know, you don't want to pay a little bit more for the sprouted corns. And again, just having your own salsa that you can make if you want to put on top of it for a taco night. You know, making kind of like a neat loaf. I have a recipe for that in the book, which is basically just beans and brown rice and oats, and, you know, getting it together with different whole grains to kind of keep it as that staple for whatever it is it's going to be in your main course. I love my tofu press. So if I want to mix it up and throw in some tofu, I'll do that. The press just kind of squeezes the water out, and then you can either bake it, let it marinate for an hour in the fridge in a little soy sauce or hoisin sauce, teriyaki sauce, and then either stir fry that into the veggies that you're going to be making, or just bake it in the oven for an hour, and it kind of shrinks and gets to be a little firm and is very, very tasty, and you can mix that in with things. So, you know, we vegans, we get plenty of protein, and so you don't really need to worry about that. But certainly there's so many different kinds of beans too. Lentils are the smallest beans. If you're not used to beans, start out small and go large. I'm a big fan of hummus. I like to make it myself, but the stores certainly carry it if you can afford that. Although the store-bought hummuses tend to have more oil in it because it makes them creamier, but you can totally make it that way at home just by adding more water in a food processor. And, you know, I used to make that all the time. I used to teach cooking classes for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I was a trained instructor for them. So hummus is just a real great staple. I also like to add some vinegar to it, and there are all these infused vinegars you can get at the store. I mean, again, we're just talking Publix here in Florida, but any mainstream store will have this. So if you add the vinegar to the hummus, it makes this really rich salad dressing. And I'm a big fan of, are we still here? I hope somebody was just trying to
go ahead.
Okay. I'm a big firm believer of trying to add salads to whatever, you know, raw, fresh greens. And so having a good salad dressing is important, because what you buy at the store is not only expensive, but it's you know, not very healthy either. So just those two ingredients, hummus, which is just beans and maybe water, or if you want to add a little bit of oil to make it to make it creamier, you can certainly do that. So yeah, it's just so easy, really.
So yesterday I had an interesting, I'm looking at it right now. One of my friends said that $15 for 2 pounds of burger? I think not. So this is in Northern Michigan, seven and a
Right.
half dollars per pound. I worked it out. This is $1 for every 200 calories. And so then I was like, wow, how much corn or grain does a feedlot steer end up getting in order to be up to weight? And uh, or really how much corn that is fed to those animals. And it worked out to, like, for $1 you could buy like 20,000 calories or 10,000 calories worth of corn. And so it's just amazing with the meat prices. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for them going up, but a lot of people are going to try meatless meals, right? A lot of people. And so it's useful to know how to prepare a meatless meal.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly corn is a good filling, sweet addition to any meal. You can add it to the salsa, but just I do want, it does remind me of the story when I was a television reporter in my first job in Des Moines, Iowa. There was a farmer who was growing corn there, and he was also growing soybeans and alternating them. And it was the first time they tried to do that. And I said, does it taste any different with the corn? He said, ma'am, you'd have to ask the cow, because all the corn in Iowa is grown for cows, and it's a different
Oh,
kind of corn. So,
sure. Yeah.
just to be clear, I don't want anybody thinking, go out and, to your nearest field in Iowa and take the farmer's corn. That will not digest real well. Anyway, but yeah, totally much cheaper to do it that way. And one of the things, I did to crunch the numbers in the recipes that I came up with is I went to places like Walmart and the big box stores and looked at the prices. Nobody had done that to that point. And we're talking, I started doing this, researching it in 2008, and I was blown away. So what I told you before, it is a dime a serving for 4 ounces of beans. And, calories aside, I'm looking at ounce per ounce. And with your friend paying that, if you do the math, cutting it to a 4-ounce serving of that hamburger, if you come up with a price, not, again, we're not talking calories, we're just talking weight measurement here, what that would be.
Well, how many ounces per pound? 16.
16, so
So
4
seven and a
ounces.
half divided by 2 would be 375. Divided by 2 again is about 189 per pound.
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
Or
I
per four
looked at
ounces.
that.
Per 4 ounces.
Right. And I was looking, I think at the time I started researching this, it was about 35 cents for an equal serving of hamburger, the cheapest form of hamburger. And there's all kinds of hamburger out there. Some of it
Sure.
is like 70% fat and blue slime or pink slime, if you remember that little additive.
Yeah, let's not
But
get into that, Helen.
I even compared it to beef tenderloin, which I think was the most expensive cut of meat I could find at Walmart. And it was like $17 a pound back then. So I don't even know if they're selling that anymore, but I'm sure, it's probably on a par with gold at this point. Who knows? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's only going to get worse because, I think part of this whole problem is that the workers at these animal plants, these factory farm plants, are getting sick and they don't want to work. And so it's going to cost a lot more if the meat, if these packing companies can even open up again. That's all been kind of thrown out the window during this whole process. So,
Yeah, I
I've long
actually
said,
mentioned to a couple people that I thought, and the reason they have to go into work is because there's people buying this stuff. And if people just maybe gave it a break for a little bit, then maybe they wouldn't have to go and work in these conditions that are not safe.
right. And maybe, eventually what needs to happen is these farmers need to convert to plants instead of, for humans instead of for the animals. Because the planet, I mean, the United Nations has been in the forefront of saying this for a long time, that the world can't sustain a diet based around meat and dairy. And I've been long saying, as long as the United Nations has been, issuing these reports for years now, that I hope you like the vegan recipes, not only in my book, but all the others, because we are going to be forced to do this. It's the lack of water and it's the lack of real estate that we had going into this crisis that was going to really make things shift toward a more plant-based diet anyway. But now
And I imagine that a big portion of the world, actually, like in India and China and Africa, a large portion of the world eats mostly plant-based, right? I mean, 95% of their diet is plant-based anyway.
Right. And, the book, the China Study, which T. Colin Campbell went AWOL from the National Institutes of Health many years ago, and writing that legendary book, that was all about what rural China was eating, and that their disease rates didn't begin to start mimicking ours in Western culture until they moved to the cities and adopted a Western diet. So, we've known this for a long time, but it's now really coming to bite us in the proverbial everywhere. So just so important to see how it's so much healthier too. I mean, Dr. Brooke Goldner, whose work I followed for a long time, she wrote the book Goodbye Lupus, and they said she'd be dead at 20. She's now alive at 40 with 2 kids from lupus. She cured herself by what she calls hypernourishment. So it's a big blender of dark green leafy vegetables with whatever liquid and some flax seeds to make it go down every day. And that totally wiped out her autoimmune disease. And she has helped hundreds of thousands of people now around the world get rid of autoimmune diseases. And she does a lot of work for free on her social media and her website, but she's
It
just
sounds like you're
amazing.
talking about diet as a form of like medicine or pharmaceuticals.
Well, actually, I was supposed to, I mean, all of my speaking gigs have been canceled. I was doing like 1 or 2 a month. And one of them was the Food is Medicine conference in Dallas. And they're going to try and do it as an online event now, like most of the different events that have been canceled. But, yeah, it's all about that. And you can measure these spontaneous remissions, or whatever you want to call them. And she wrote a book. She had written 2 books prior to this last one, but her last one is called Goodbye Autoimmune Disease. And in it, she features all these people who have, within a period of weeks or months, cured themselves of these different autoimmune diseases. And I'm actually in there because I was diagnosed, and it's a long story that I won't bore you with psoriatic arthritis. And I thought, my life was over. I'd be lucky to be walking in a year, let alone running. And once I realized that I was just eating too many Cliff Bars instead of, and replacing the Cliff Bars with, not replacing the greens that I'd been eating with the Cliff Bars, because I was on book tour constantly. Once I realized, I'd gotten away from the 9 vegetables, servings of vegetables every day. And once, I got back in my life, all of that disappeared. So she's got my before and after pictures in there. And it was pretty amazing. My fingernails were starting to fall off. My hands were all red and cracked and bleeding from psoriatic arthritis. And I just felt, like with most autoimmune diseases, very tired and lethargic. And again, I was wondering how I was ever going to get back to running. And since then, before all the races shut down, I was really hoping to get to my 200th 5K or longer age group award since 2006, just on plants. And the races all shut down here, as they have everywhere. And I've only placed in 199. So I can't wait until things open up again, and it's going to be a real celebration with that number 200, because people tell me they don't know of anybody who's placed in 5K or longer races that many times. So
how long have you been plant-based? I mean, is this something, and why did you go to it? Is this something so you could be healthier to run? And another follow-on question, are you implying that going plant-based, vegan, there's kind of a better way to do it and maybe not the Cliff Bar way? I mean, do a lot of people that try vegan kind of fall into that wrong category, I guess?
yeah, and I was going down the slippery slope. I thought, well, I'm on the road with my publisher, and we'll go to a good vegan restaurant one night of the tour. And then while I was standing at his table helping him and myself sell my books, you're always talking to people. So I was just, downing these things and not paying attention. And I think also it was just kind of a rugged lifestyle, always being on planes. What we know now, I mean, a lot of us authors referred to something that we called back then called the plane flu. And, you could almost pinpoint it 72 hours after jumping off a plane, when you've been sitting next to somebody who's sneezing and coughing, and then you've got it. So, fortunately, nothing real serious, but just, you're in close proximity to other people who are not healthy. So having a strong immune system is really, really part of that. So, I think, as I mentioned, I got to veganism early on, after my mom, aunt, both sisters had breast cancer, my aunt died of it in our home when I was 5 years old. So I spent 18 years in TV news, won a couple of Emmys and the National Press Club Award. And I was always trying to interview doctors and dietitians because I had this sort of little hidden agenda of trying to figure out what is the truth about food. And so I started first macrobiotically because I was really trying to avoid cancer, then went to vegetarian, then vegan. That was my progression, which is pretty typical of women my age, starting in the 1980s. And then as this got kind of progressed, veganism made so much more sense, of course, for animal rights. When my babies were small, they're now, fully fledged adults, but they would be in my arms as I went to the circus protests in St. Louis, where I started doing all of this. And for health reasons back then, Dr. Neil Barnard was just jumping on the lecture circuit. And sorry, I got my low battery. I've been doing so many Zoom calls. It's like I had to sit in my car today to charge it. Anyway. So yeah, so health definitely was the reason. So the better part of 40 years, as long as I've been running, it's pretty much when I started going down this rabbit hole of veganism. And, I just had so much more energy, and people still come up to me, and when you do competitive racing, people know your age. And I just had people come up to me at races and saying, yeah, no way. Show us your driver's. Somebody actually did ask to see my driver's license. So, there's that,
do you want to share your age with us or no?
What do you think?
55.
67. So.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
You don't look like you're 60.
Let me get my driver's license. No. Yeah, I'll be 68 soon, actually. So, yeah, it's really the best kept secret in America. It's just all the plants that we eat have so much water in them, so that helps. I have a love-hate with caffeine at the moment. I'm loving it. So, you get a little more dehydrated when you're not drinking as much water and replacing it with caffeine, but that's my little indulgence. Yeah, and I, again, had some starts and stops along the way. I just want to mention that because 40 years ago when I was pregnant, some of the doctors would say weird things like, you're going to cause your unborn fetus brain damage if you don't drink whey protein and get, additional calcium and protein. And there are other women my age, when I say that, they nod their heads like, how did we even begin to believe stuff like that? But that's how they were educated, of course, and mainly by the Dairy Council, I think, because we're the only species that drinks milk from another species. I went off the deep end so much once I realized that breast milk, human breast milk, is ideal for our own babies, our own species development. And I became a accredited La Leche League leader, which is the nonprofit volunteer group where moms call you in the middle of the night, my baby won't nurse, come help me. And I would do that. And what I learned in all of that, because we had privy to the research that was coming out at the time as it was being done, is that mammalian milk is very species specific, and human milk is made to make our brains grow very large in a short period of time. And cow's milk is made for a baby cow to grow very large in a short period of time. And oh, by the way, there's research now that shows that cancer tumors will grow very large in a short period of time when you're drinking milk from another species. So there's so many reasons to be plant-based at this point. Nutritionally, we don't need to be drinking cow's milk, just everything from plants.
Well, let's wrap it up. And what would be like if someone was wanting to tomorrow have a full meal plan for the day, as cheap as they could go, but still, eating well? What breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a family of 4? Anything you could just throw out?
So, breakfast for me has always been the same, either steel cut oats or old fashioned oats. Just boil the water, throw some berries on top if you can, buy the frozen kind. So, if you want to skimp a little bit on that, you don't have to buy the $3 a package fresh berries, although I do like to do that. And berries are so good for trying to prevent Alzheimer's. But some raisins if you want to sweeten it up a little bit, some chopped dates if you really want to do that. They're high in fiber. And so that's breakfast. If you want to add plant-based milk, that's another cost. So you don't do it. I usually just boil water, pour it over the oats, or cook the oats in the water and let it sit for a while. And then don't use, I save my plant-based milk for the smoothies if I want to add plant-based milk. Again, you don't have to do that. So lunch, that's really where I make my salad. Any leftover salad goes to dinner if there is any. But, I'll do a can of beans over the salad, a little salad dressing. We live near actually a farmer's market. So one tip is to get some of the produce as it's older, and sometimes they'll discount it. So when you go to the farmer's market on a Saturday or Sunday, and if they've got some boxes of stuff that they really don't want to sell, I've definitely done that. So any vegetables that I have on hand will go into a stir fry at night. I really like to have my rice or quinoa or millet at night. The carbohydrates are really tasty. And to keep the weight down, I do air pop popcorn at night if we're watching a movie and we feel like, we want to crunch. I'm really trying not to eat so many Clif Bars. And they're expensive, even if you do order them in bulk. My kids have screamed at me never to go to the grocery store because I'm so old. I'm in that risk category, of course. But, I guess I shouldn't be too cavalier. I have heard of vegans getting COVID, although I did start a Facebook page called COVID and Vegans just to see if anybody would, chime in there. But, it doesn't make you immune, of course, but I think there are a lot of things we can do to, in addition to wearing masks and gloves and all that fun stuff, just, keeping our immune system as spiffed up as we can. So to the extent you can pay money to get the greens in there, often the kale may be cheaper than spinach. You just have to kind of price that out. But buying the beans in bulk, that's really key. The last time I was in Walmart, the 20-pound bag of pinto beans, for some reason, they're cheaper than the others by a little bit. It was like, whatever it worked out, it was a dime a serving, a nickel an ounce. So that's what you want to look for, is that little red box, if they still have that, depending on your store, the price per ounce, a nickel per ounce. You really can't go wrong when you're buying protein at that cheap of a price. And it's good quality protein, of course. Pretty much any bean. The larger the bean, they tend to be a little more expensive. But again, for whatever reason, pintos, I guess maybe there's more of them, more of a larger supply, because they're often used in different canned products. So maybe they just grow more of them.
If someone wants to get more information about how to eat well on $4 a day, where can they find your book and your stuff?
It's all over, Amazon. My publisher still has it on his website, The Book Publishing. They are the oldest, largest vegan publisher in the US. So they have a lot of good titles. But, pretty much anywhere books are sold, which, is important to kind of keep supporting authors who are still trying to get this information out there. Because, you may notice that I'm sitting in a real estate office because that's what I'm doing now. I've been doing this since 2011. And then when not that I was making really any money from doing this, it really was pretty much a labor of love. And I had stopped doing media consulting, which was my last day job. So, now I've been able to join my boyfriend, who is vegan, who's been doing real estate in Sarasota for the last 34 years. And we have quite, did you want to stick your head and say hi, honey? Yeah, sure. This is, if this is kind of cool.
Sure, go ahead.
A romantic love story here. This is Troy Funk. Yes. And he's a runner too. And so we were.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Okay, I'll tell the story. Fine. All right. He was on his way out somewhere. So he's the broker in this office, but we had known each other for 4 years while I was still on the lecture circuit. And he was actually, he had some health issues in his family that he was trying to answer, which is what drove him to actually go from Sarasota to see Portland. He'd heard that Portland had the best vegfest anywhere, so he thought there would be answers there. So lo and behold, he found me there. I was actually speaking. So we first met at that location. And then he used to have meetups in the Sarasota area back when people could get together in groups of larger than 6. And I was at the last meetup that he had and said, if you know any vegan guys locally, please send them my way. And so about 2 weeks later, he called and he said, would you like to go out just as a friend? So as it turns out, we both had raced competitively and we started doing that. And, you know, the friend thing lasted about 6 weeks. So I joined him. I got my real estate license and joined him in his brokerage here. And we are just having the time of our lives, considering the situation that we've had. So I guess the message there is, you know, there's hope, and just do what you love, because life is short, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ellen. And for everybody who's watching, if you haven't yet done the thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications and put in a comment, go ahead, because if you appreciate content like this on the internet, then show your appreciation and you'll have more people providing more stuff. Thank you so much, Ellen, for being on the line with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. All the best to everybody. Stay healthy, y'all.